Trapped in a freezing mountain cave, pregnant alone and surrounded by hostile terrain, Margaret Tilden grasped for survival in the aftermath of a devastating wagon massacre. Just as desperation weighs her down, a reclusive mountain man enters her hiding place, vowing revenge on the same outlaws that destroyed her world. Between the cold nights and the constant fear that ruthless bandits lurk nearby, Margaret's will to protect her unborn child burns brighter than ever. How does one even begin to forge trust, especially when crossing paths by pure chance in a bear's den? To find out what incredible journey awaits them, filled with daring escapes, unlikely friendships, and a battle for justice, be sure to immerse yourself in the full story. If you enjoy courageous tales like this, subscribe to our channel to support us and never miss another heart-stirring narrative. Your support helps keep these stories alive for everyone who needs a reminder that hope and courage can blossom in even the harshest circumstances. In the autumn of 1873, deep in the rugged territory east of the Stonefang Mountains, a gunshot pierced the crisp air. One shot became dozens each, echo reverberating off the towering cliffs. By sundown, the wagon train en route to California lay in ruin. Broken woods, scattered belongings, and still bodies stretched across the blood-smeared ground. The infamous Blackmore gang, led by the ruthless Gideon Blackmore, had left no one breathing in what locals later called the Red Pass Massacre, or so they believed. But hidden among the aspen grove, Margaret Tilden clutched her pregnant belly and remained very much alive. She'd started this trip with her husband Andrew, leaving their small Pennsylvania farm for the promise of California's fertile valleys. Letters from Andrew's cousin had boasted of orchard-ready soil, easy living, and a fresh start for the child Margaret carried due in a matter of weeks. The wagon train they joined was large, 20-some families all chasing the same dream. Among them was Margaret's closest friend on the road, Ruth Harrison, who was even further along, determined to give birth in a new land of opportunity. Yet their optimism evaporated the moment shots rang out near Serpent's Crossing, a treacherous gap between jagged cliffs. The travelers had been lulled into a false sense of security by weeks of relatively peaceful travel. That morning, Ruth had joked about her baby boy being born with a shovel in his hand ready to unearth California gold. Margaret had laughed, placing a hand on her own swelling abdomen, mentioning how her little one always kicked hardest when the caravan climbed steep grades, as if the baby was born for the mountains. She never could have imagined that within hours those same mountains would echo with the dying cries of friends and loved ones. Margaret had lagged behind when the first shots were fired, her back aching badly. She'd stepped away from the train to rest under a stand of aspens. That small decision saved her life. From her hiding spot, she witnessed chaos. Men on horseback, faces half hidden by bandanas, systematically firing upon wagons and people. She recognized Gideon Blackmore easily, the largest man in the group, his black beard and cold eyes scanning the carnage like a hunter overseeing trapped prey. The gunfire subsided quickly, replaced by rummaging, curses, and a few desperate pleas for mercy, cut short by vicious retaliation. Frozen in terror, Margaret pressed herself to the ground, stifling whimpers. She knew Andrew was out there, likely among the fallen. Fear for him, for Ruth, and for all their dreams collided inside her. She remained prone until dusk, the bandits' horses stomping about, their voices barking orders. Gideon commanded them to torch anything of value, leaving only charred remains. One of his henchmen asked about salvageable livestock, but Gideon growled that no witnesses should remain. No livestock, no survivors, no evidence. Finally, after the killers rode south, Margaret forced herself to move. She found Andrew near the remnants of their wagon, dead from a single bullet wound. Numb with sorrow, she took his pocket watch, still ticking from his limp hand its steady rhythm, mockingly suggesting that life continued. She thought of her unborn child and swore in a voice hoarse from grief that she would carry on. She gathered scraps of supplies, a mostly intact canteen, a worn blanket, half a loaf of bread, a tin cup, and a small knife. Stifling sobs, she trudged away from the horror site, slipping into a narrow game trail that disappeared into the darkening woods. Rain began to fall, and she found refuge in the recess of a shallow cave, not realizing at first that the cave bore the pungent marks of recent bear habitation. Margaret awoke the next morning to fitful gray light, illuminating claw marks on the cave walls and bits of animal bones scattered in a corner. A bear had once sheltered here. Perhaps it still did. Her heart lurched at the realization she couldn't remain. Exhausted, pregnant, grieving, she pushed aside the blanket she'd used as a bedroll and crept to the cave's entrance. Outside, the drizzle had eased, leaving a landscape soaked from the night's storm, which mercifully washed away her footprints. Forcing herself to eat a few bites of the stale bread, Margaret assessed her situation. She had a little water left in the canteen, a knife she barely knew how to use, and a body heavy with child. The wagon train's trail west was likely blocked by more of Gideon Blackmore's men, or so she feared. But going east meant returning to the site of the massacre, to Andrew's body, and the stench of death. She trembled, a wave of dizziness passing over her. She had to find real shelter, better food, maybe even other survivors if any existed. Adrenaline carried her through the next hours. She foraged for dandelion greens and edible roots, recalling half-remembered survival tips from women she'd met along the journey. A thorny bush with tiny red fruits teased her memory. Did someone once say these were safe if ripe? She decided not to risk it, mindful of how sickness could kill her faster than any bandit's bullet in these conditions. Keeping to higher ground, she climbed a slope to see if she could spot any sign of a settlement. The steep ascent taxed her, but she gritted her teeth, placing a protective hand on her belly whenever a contraction-like spasm flared. Finally, she reached a rocky ledge. Through shifting mist, she glimpsed the valley below, blackened wagons, burnt debris, and disturbingly, 3 riders milling about. Their postures suggested searching. Margaret's stomach twisted. The Blackmore gang had returned to confirm they left no survivors. Her best course was to stay hidden in the rugged peaks, yet her meager supplies couldn't sustain her indefinitely. She needed a plan. Retreating quietly, she returned to the cave, reasoning that the bear might have vacated or at least wouldn't return until spring. She decided it was safer than the open terrain, given the watchers below. That afternoon, she carefully erased her footprints near the cave mouth with a bundle of pine needles. Then she lined the interior floor with fresh boughs, improving her makeshift bedding. Exhaustion overtook her again, and she slipped into a restless sleep. Sometime near twilight, she bolted awake at the crunch of stone outside the cave. Her heart hammered. Was it Gideon's men, or had the bear returned? Clutching her knife, she shrank deeper into the darkness. A figure loomed against the dim light of the entrance, a tall man in a buckskin coat, rifle in one hand. He paused, scanning the shadows. "I know you're in here," he called, voice low and edged with concern. "I'm not one of them." I swear Margaret's fingers trembled around her knife. Could she trust this stranger if he was indeed a member of Gideon Blackmore's gang? He might be playing a ruse. The man set his rifle aside, raising both palms in a show of peace. "My name's Logan Reed. I've been on the trail of those murderers for months. I saw your tracks leading here after the storm." He carefully shifted, revealing a ragged scar on his left shoulder. "They gave me this scar half a year ago, part of why I hunt them now." A moment passed, thick with tension. Finally, Margaret stepped forward, just enough that the knife glinted in the faint light. She could make out Logan's features, gaunt face, weathered cheeks, eyes that held a haunted intensity. "I'm Margaret Tilden," she said, voice rough. "I survived that massacre in the valley. They killed my husband and everyone else." Her gaze dropped as emotion choked her. "You truly aren't one of them." Logan shook his head. "No, ma'am. My own kin was slaughtered by Gideon Blackmore's gang. I've made it my purpose to see them answered for with or without the law. I followed their tracks here, but was too late to stop them at Serpent's Crossing." His voice softened. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect your people." She lowered her knife. The sincerity in his tone and the scar's testimony made her believe him. Logan lifted a brow, noticing the claw marks. "Realize you're in a bear cave, likely black bear. They'll leave you be if they've moved to thicker woods. But we can't be sure. I couldn't find better shelter." Margaret admitted, tears threatening again. "I don't know where else to go." Logan inhaled, his gaze landing on her visibly pregnant stomach. "The truth is, none of us are safe so close to Gideon's territory. I've got a small camp about 4 miles north, hidden, stocked with some supplies. If you trust me, I'll get you there. But we should hurry, because they might figure out someone survived and trace your trail," though fear gnawed at her. Margaret also recognized the desperation of her predicament, alone, pregnant, barely equipped. She nodded shakily. "All right, Mr. Reed, but know that I can defend myself if you turn on me." A faint, wry half-smile tugged at Logan's lips. "I wouldn't dream of it. Mrs. Tilden, we'd best move now. Storm clouds are gathering again." He collected his rifle and gestured for her to follow. Outside, the evening sky glowed with waning light, and a biting wind swept down from the mountains. Margaret gathered her scant belongings, a scorched blanket, the canteen, her small knife, and let Logan guide her along a precarious path that threaded around the ridge. At times he used a pine branch to sweep away footprints. Periodically he halted, scanning the distance for any sign of horsemen. They passed through a narrow, rocky defile as thunder rumbled overhead. Margaret's lungs burned, her back ached. But she pushed forward. She glanced at Logan's face, seeing steeled resolve, someone driven by personal vendetta. After an hour, they reached a concealed line shack amid thick pines barely visible until they stood upon it. Logan unlocked the stout door, beckoning Margaret inside. Tired beyond measure, she stepped into a single-room space warmed by a stone hearth, shelves, stocked with dried goods and a small chimney built into the wall. Exhaustion swamped her, and she sank onto a chair near the fireplace. Logan hung his dripping coat to dry, then knelt to stir embers in the hearth. "Rest, Mrs. Tilden," he said gently. "You're safe here for now." Margaret blinked at the soft glow of the cabin's modest lantern light. In a corner, Logan Reed busied himself preparing a simple meal of dried beans and rabbit stew. Outside, heavy rain hammered down, drumming on the roof and turning the surrounding terrain into a mire that further masked their presence. A battered table and two chairs occupied the center of the room. A small loft area above held extra supplies. Though cramped, the cabin felt surprisingly secure, like a hideaway fashioned for long winters. As Logan worked, Margaret noticed a quiet determination in his actions. There was no idle talk, no wasted movement. He set a wooden bowl in front of her, filled with steaming stew. The scent made her stomach clench with hunger. Even amid grief, she ate slowly, recalling that she hadn't had a real meal since before the massacre. After they'd both finished, Logan poured a small mug of coffee, handing it to her. So he said quietly, "You want to tell me what happened at Serpent's Crossing, from your perspective?" She studied his face, seeing empathy rather than mere curiosity. He was gathering intel, but also offering a listening ear for her trauma. Margaret exhaled, voice trembling, as she recounted the events. How Andrew had driven their oxen that morning. How she'd paused to rest, how the attack blindsided them. "I saw Gideon Blackmore and recognized him from descriptions travelers shared. Tall, black-bearded, commanding. I heard him order his men to leave no one alive." Tears blurred her vision as she recalled Andrew's lifeless form among the wreckage. Logan listened, only interrupting to ask clarifying questions about the gang's size or distinctive members she might have glimpsed. She admitted she'd noticed a second man giving orders, Elijah Gideon's younger brother, known for his cold efficiency. When she finished, Logan leaned back, tension in his jaw evident. "I've tracked them across 2 territories," he said. "I lost my own sister's family to them near Laramie. The law called it a mysterious raid, but folks knew the Blackmore gang was involved. Officially, the case was closed. Lack of evidence. But I swore I'd find evidence or make it myself if that's what it took." Margaret met his gaze. "You risk your life for vengeance, Mr. Reed." "It's more than vengeance," he clarified, staring at his scarred shoulder. "It's about ensuring no one else suffers, as we have. The territorial government either can't or won't stop Gideon. Corruption or fear, maybe both." She nodded. "I understand. Those men don't just steal valuables. They steal futures. They took my child's father. They took everything from me, but I have to survive for this baby's sake." Logan placed a reassuring hand on her arm, then withdrew it suddenly, self-conscious. "We'll figure something out for now. Rest. I'll keep watch tonight. Tomorrow we'll decide the next steps. If you can handle it, we might head deeper into the uplands, away from the main trails, or find an ally." "I'm not sure." Margaret appreciated his cautiousness. She stared into the fire, letting the fatigue seep into her bones. Now that she wasn't alone, her mind dared to flicker with a glimmer of hope. Yet lying just beneath was the persistent fear Gideon Blackmore wouldn't let a survivor roam free. She joined Logan's quest for safety and possibly justice, knowing there was no true sanctuary until the gang was dismantled. That night, as she dozed on the bed, lulled by the crackle of flames and the rain's lullaby, Logan stood guard by the window. Outside, darkness concealed enemies that might close in at any moment. Inside, a fragile alliance formed between a grieving widow and a mountain man burdened by retribution. Dawn arrived, hazy and cool mist rolling off the slopes around Logan's hidden line shack. Margaret stirred awake to the smell of coffee and the warmth of a freshly stoked fire. Laying on the makeshift bed, her belly prominent, she felt her baby shifting, a testament to life persisting even amid upheaval. She levered herself upright, recalling with a pang of sorrow how she once imagined Andrew calmly guiding her through these final weeks. Instead, she found herself reliant on a near stranger. Outside, droplets glistened on pine boughs. Logan stood at the threshold, scanning the perimeter for signs of trespass. "All quiet," he announced, as she rose to join him. "No hoofprints but ours." The rain did us a favor. She nodded, relieved. Gathering the small blanket around her shoulders, she stepped out into a morning that smelled of wet earth and pine. We have limited supplies. Mr. Reed, if we're to stay hidden, we need more food, maybe better shelter for the baby's arrival. He glanced at her, brow knitted. We can't linger here long. Gideon's men might not have found this shack yet, but if they suspect I'm on their trail, they'll widen their search. The Laconia winter camp is about 6 miles from here in the hills. The Laconia are reclusive but fair. Once their chief Black Hawk helped me when I was wounded. If we go there, we might secure some supplies and counsel. Margaret's recollections of native camps were limited. Rumors claimed they distrusted outsiders, but her life had changed drastically in recent days. She recalled how some had guided wagons around difficult passes showing travelers fording spots and edible wild plants. She nodded thoughtfully. If they'll allow me in, I'll be grateful. It's safer than trying to trek directly to any settlement. The roads are too exposed. They ate a quick meal of jerky and leftover stew. Logan meticulously doused the fire, then packed essential items into saddlebags. Margaret's meager possessions fit in a small satchel, which she slung over her shoulder. Before they departed, Logan took time to mask their footprints around the cabin, smoothing the mud and rearranging fallen branches. They traveled on horseback, a sure-footed mare for Margaret and a larger gelding for Logan. Though the going was slow, Margaret's balance precarious with her advanced pregnancy, she found small comfort in the routine. She focused on the rhythmic sway of the horse, the looming pines overhead, and the crisp mountain air that gave each breath a sense of renewal. Occasionally, a twinge of pain reminded her that labor could start unexpectedly. By midday, they approached a series of ridges rising from the valley. Logan pointed to a distant wisp of smoke. Laconia territory, he explained. They often place watchers around the perimeter. We might be met before we see the main camp. Sure enough, a slight movement in the underbrush alerted them. Logan lifted a hand in a sign of peace. An arrow whistled past them, burying itself in the ground a yard away. A clear warning. Then a figure emerged, a Laconia warrior with dark, appraising eyes. Moments later, 3 more stepped forward, bows half drawn. Black Hawk himself soon arrived, wearing a fringed buckskin cloak, hair streaked with gray eyes, bright with intelligence. Logan dismounted, speaking carefully in the Laconia tongue. The chief listened, gaze darting between Logan's scar and Margaret's pregnant form. An uneasy hush fell over the group. Margaret waited, heart hammering. If Black Hawk refused them entry, where else could they go? Logan finished explaining their plight. Stepping back, the chief studied Margaret a long moment, then nodded. Come, he said in clipped English. Laconia protect those who come in peace, especially a woman about to bring life into this world. The Laconia winter camp, nestled in a valley sheltered by towering pines and rock formations that broke the wind, dozens of lodges formed concentric circles around a central fire pit. Smoke curled skyward from cooking fires, and the murmur of conversation permeated the air. Children darted among the lodges, giggling, while older men and women tended to hides prepared meals or shaped arrowheads. Black Hawk guided Logan and Margaret to a larger lodge near the center, where he introduced his wife, Blooming Flower, a respected healer. Blooming Flower greeted Margaret with warm but reserved courtesy, leading her inside. The lodge's interior was spacious and smelled of sage, a central fire illuminating painted designs on the walls. Margaret felt an immediate sense of security, though she was acutely aware of how precarious her presence might be. Laconia sometimes resented white encroachment, and she was a stranger. Yet, Blooming Flower regarded her swollen belly with a sympathetic nod, quietly assuring her that the Laconia welcomed mothers who needed sanctuary. Black Hawk and Logan spoke quietly near the entrance, their voices too low for Margaret to catch. She busied herself by removing her travel-worn shoes, grateful for the soft buffalo hide rugs that cushioned her feet. Blooming Flower offered a bowl of herbal-infused water for Margaret to drink, explaining it would restore her strength. The tangy taste was oddly comforting, and a flush of warmth spread through her limbs. When the men joined them, Black Hawk's expression carried decision. My friend Logan helped my son 2 winters ago, he said, voice measured but clear. Now I repay that debt by granting you shelter, but do not linger too long. The snows have receded, but more storms may come. The Blackmore gang is unwelcome on our lands, but they are cunning. If they discover you here, the Laconia will protect ourselves first. Logan nodded. We understand. I only ask for rest and some supplies, so Margaret can safely bring her child into the world. How close? Blooming Flower asked Margaret, gently resting a hand on her abdomen. Margaret drew a shaky breath. A few weeks, maybe less. Stress could hasten things. Blooming Flower's face grew thoughtful as she translated this to Blackhawk, who responded by giving instructions to a younger woman named Running Bird. The Laconia often considered childbirth a community affair with women's roles highly respected. Blooming Flower had apparently served as midwife before. For the next several days, Margaret found herself integrated into Laconia daily rhythms. They taught her about the local plants, medicinal salves, and methods to conserve energy. She watched as Running Bird deftly set snares for rabbits, murmuring to Logan how astonishing it was that any single aspect of living off the land once foreign to her now seemed vital. Meanwhile, Blooming Flower insisted she rest often, especially when her baby's movements triggered mild cramps. Logan spent his time conferring with Blackhawk about any sightings of Gideon Blackmore's gang. Some Laconia scouts reported glimpses of suspicious riders near the far ridges, but they didn't linger. They know to avoid a full Laconia confrontation, Blackhawk remarked. They watch, hoping to catch you leaving. This revelation chilled Margaret. Realizing the cunning outlaws still hunted for survivors of the Serpent's Crossing carnage, at night, as the Laconia settlement fell into quiet, Margaret often lay awake in the lodge. She grappled with conflicting emotions, grief for Andrew, gratitude for Logan, and the Laconia fear for her unborn child's future. But through it all, a kernel of determination grew. She would not merely survive. She would protect this child from Gideon's reach. She suspected Logan felt similarly about avenging his own family, forging an unspoken bond deeper than mere circumstance. On the sixth day in the Laconia camp, Blooming Flower's predictions proved accurate. Margaret woke before dawn with a tightening in her abdomen that felt sharper, more insistent than the intermittent aches she'd experienced. She tried to rest, but the waves soon became rhythmic, leaving her breathless. By sunrise, Blooming Flower had positioned her in a private section of the lodge, instructing Running Bird to fetch hot water, clean cloths, and certain herbs. Logan paced restlessly outside his usual stoic composure, fraying. Labor set in fully by mid-morning. Margaret clung to a braided leather rope hung from the central lodge, support sweat beading on her brow, as each contraction claimed her. Blooming Flower pressed warm compresses to her lower back, speaking quietly in Laconia running. Bird offered sips of an herbal drink that eased some discomfort. Through the haze of pain, Margaret occasionally heard Logan's low voice talking with Blackhawk outside, the baby's arrival overshadowing any immediate worry of Gideon's gang hours blurred. The lodge grew stifling as the central fire crackled, and Margaret's entire existence narrowed to the fierce ache in her body. She remembered Andrew's gentle hands, how he'd rubbed her ankles after a long day's wagon travel, never imagining he wouldn't be here for this. The longing threatened to distract her from the vital work of bringing new life forth. "Breathe, Blooming," Flower murmured, pressing a firm palm to Margaret's forehead. "Focus on your heart, on the child's movement. He is strong." Margaret nodded, tears of exertion and sorrow mingling. She bore down as another contraction tore through her. Then, in a swirl of agony that peaked and broke like a wave, she heard the first outraged cry of her newborn. Relief and exhaustion collapsed her mind, leaving her weak-limbed and trembling. Through half-lidded eyes, she glimpsed Blooming Flower lifting the squalling infant, swiftly checking vital signs, before placing the tiny bundle in Margaret's arms, a son. The healer declared softly. A Running Bird provided a clean fur to wrap him. His wails subsided as Margaret cradled him against her chest, heart pounding with a rush of emotions. Moments later, Logan entered quietly, face etched with concern. He froze upon seeing Margaret holding the newborn. She managed a weary smile. "We made it," she whispered, tears of relief glistening. Logan stepped nearer, stooping to see the child's pink face. He's perfect," Logan said softly, voice awed. Blooming Flower gently ushered him back, letting Margaret and the baby bond, but a small, proud grin lingered on his lips. For the Laconia, a child's birth under their roof was a sacred event. They offered chants of blessing. Blackhawk invoked ancestral spirits to watch over the new life, effectively tying Margaret's survival to the camp's goodwill. The baby's lusty cries confirmed strong lungs, and Blooming Flower nodded in satisfaction, calling him Little Eagle in Laconia, though she allowed Margaret to christen him with her chosen name, Daniel. Despite the triumphant moment, reality soon intruded. By late afternoon, Running Bird returned from a scouting patrol, reporting that Gideon's men were spotted near a trading post east of the valley, questioning locals about any white woman traveling with child. Tension rippled through the Laconia. "The outlaws do not dare attack us openly," Blackhawk told Logan, "but if they catch you leaving, they might strike at the outskirts." Margaret listened as she cuddled Daniel, alarm rising. She'd just endured an arduous birth, and now they might have to flee again. Logan's jaw set. We can't lead that scum back to your camp. Let us remain until Margaret recovers enough to travel. Then we'll move discreetly. Blackhawk nodded, but his expression was grim. The Laconia had no wish for war with the Blackmore gang, but nor would they betray guests who had become family. In the short time outside, a breeze rustled the pines, carrying the promise of storms yet again. Inside, the fragile peace coalesced around a newborn's soft breath and a mother's newfound strength. Days turned into a fortnight. Margaret regained strength at a remarkable pace, aided by Laconia remedies and Blooming Flower's vigilant care. Daniel thrived, nursing heartily. Running Bird marveled at how quickly he gained weight, calling him the little fighter. Meanwhile, Logan worked with Blackhawk's warriors to reinforce perimeter watch. Rumors trickled in Gideon had retreated to a more remote hideout. Some men rumored dead from conflicts with other outlaw factions. No one knew for certain, but that offered little comfort. One afternoon, Margaret found Logan at the edge of the camp, staring out over the valley. "I see that look," she remarked, shifting Daniel in her arms. "You're itching to finish what you started." He gave a short laugh. "I'd be lying if I said otherwise. Gideon Blackmore doesn't deserve to roam free. But I also realize my personal vendetta doesn't outweigh your safety or Daniel's." Margaret laid a gentle hand on his arm. "We can't run forever, Logan. I've thought about it every night. We have to see Gideon brought to justice or else we'll always be hunted." He exhaled, running a calloused hand through his hair. "I was hoping you'd choose a safer path, but you're right. If he stands, he'll keep searching for you for me. The question is how to do it. The local law is compromised. Who do we trust?" Blackhawk joined them, hearing the tail end of their conversation. He considered their words. The trade network extends wide. News flows among tribes, traders, sometimes reaching distant forts. If Gideon truly has powerful protectors in the territorial government, you must go beyond them. Seek a federal judge who despises corruption. I've heard rumors of one named Burton investigating the governor's office. Logan's eyes narrowed. Judge Burton. That name rings a bell. Suppose he's at Fort Carter by now, investigating claims of official collusion with outlaws. If so, that might be our chance. Margaret's heart fluttered. We have proof. Remember, those satchels from the wagon train had surveyed maps of valuable land, possibly with ties to Gideon's deals. If we could get those to a judge like Burton, that might finally nail Gideon. A hush fell each of them, recognizing how precarious a journey to Fort Carter would be, especially with an infant. But the path seemed the only way to secure lasting safety. "Give me a day," Logan murmured. "I'll speak to the watchers about Gideon's known whereabouts. If the roads are passable, we can slip out under cover of darkness, skirt the main trails, and head for Fort Carter." Blackhawk nodded. "The Laconia will not hinder your quest for justice, but I warn you, traveling with a baby and a child, you move slower. Gideon's men may notice any sign of you. Use caution." Over the next day, they'd prepared meticulously. Blooming Flower sewed a special carrier for Daniel to keep him snug against Margaret's chest, hands-free. Running Bird helped Logan assemble additional supplies: dried venison, medicinal herbs, arrowheads. Margaret practiced firing a small revolver Logan had given her, learning to steady her shaking hands. Meanwhile, Daniel seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, sleeping soundly or cooing at Laconia children who peered in curiosity. Late that evening, as the moon hid behind clouds, the small party said farewells. Their departure was quietly significant. The Laconia stood gathered in respectful silence, acknowledging that White Owl, their nickname for Margaret, and Silent Wolf, their moniker for Logan, were leaving with a newborn life in tow. Blooming Flower hugged Margaret and Daniel, muttering blessings. Blackhawk clasped Logan's forearm in mutual respect. Then they disappeared into the shadows, heading toward an uncertain destiny, with only determination and a handful of leads to guide them. For nearly 2 weeks, Margaret Logan. Emily, the rescued child from earlier in the original version, was replaced here. We need to maintain Emily or Hannah. Wait, the original story introduced Emily later. Actually, let's rename her to Hannah for clarity. Apologies. The child from Logan's family is named Hannah in the rewrite. Let's incorporate that detail properly. Adjusting paragraph to incorporate Hannah's presence as she replaced Emily in the original plot. We assume Hannah was introduced when Logan rescued her from the Blackmore camp. Continue. For nearly 2 weeks, Margaret, Logan, Hannah, and baby Daniel traversed winding mountain paths toward Fort Carter. The Laconia had provided horses and precise directions for lesser-known routes. Hannah, Logan's niece, had been rescued from the Blackmore camp months prior, and her silent resilience mirrored Margaret's own. The journey proved grueling. Late snowmelt created boggy trails, and thick undergrowth forced them to detour more than once. Yet they avoided major roads, evading Gideon's watchers. Daniel fussed intermittently, but Margaret skillfully quieted him with the herbal teas Blooming Flower had provided. The child grew more alert daily, his bright eyes taking in the shimmering pines and rocky outcrops. Hannah, though haunted by her trauma, gradually regained a childhood spark, sometimes humming tunes she remembered from before the massacre of her family. Logan occasionally joined in, softly bridging the gap between them, with shared sorrow turned to gentle companionship. Margaret's own transformation was palpable. Once reliant on others for survival, she now set traps for small game, brewed healing teas, and navigated terrain with a confidence that would have stunned her former self. Grief for Andrew lingered as a dull ache, but in Daniel's face she found reasons to hope. In Logan's unwavering presence, she found a steadfast ally, and possibly more. Their goal was to deliver crucial evidence gleaned from Gideon's stolen papers. Before leaving the Laconia, Logan had retrieved hidden documents that tied Gideon to a corrupt branch of the territorial government. If they could place this evidence in Judge Burton's hands, the fortress of corruption might topple, providing justice for countless victims. But Logan suspected Gideon had retreated to a fortress-like hideout near Fort Carter, determined to intercept any witness who threatened his empire. 3 days from the fort, they encountered the first sign of the law. A small patrol of federal marshals apparently investigating rumors of Gideon's presence hailed them. Initially, Logan tensed, but once assured these marshals answered only to Judge Burton, he relaxed marginally. The marshals recognized Hannah from posted bulletins describing a kidnapped child survivor, leading to an emotional moment of confirmation. They escorted the party closer to Fort Carter, explaining that Gideon's men were rumored to be active in the region, but Judge Burton had arrived to hold formal hearings. At Fort Carter's outskirts, a cluster of newly built barracks in a fledgling settlement greeted them. Soldiers and civilians mingled in dusty streets. Some paused at the sight of Margaret's group, especially noticing the baby. Hannah peered around nervously, gripping Logan's hand, while Daniel cooed against Margaret's chest. A sense of relief washed over them. Here was an outpost of law that wasn't compromised by Gideon's influence, or so they hoped. Marshal Cornell, a tall man with a walrus mustache, and his younger partner Fisk, who bore burn scars on one hand, introduced themselves. Judge Burton's been expecting survivors from that wagon train. Cornell said, relief evident. Rumor had it you carried documents to prove Gideon's link to the governor? We had no idea if those rumors were credible until now. You must see him at once. Logan and Margaret exchanged a weighted glance, exhaling after so many trials. Another step in their long fight for justice lay ahead, but at least they'd reached a place where officials might care, where vengeance might transform into lawful reckoning. They were ushered into Fort Carter's modest administrative building, where Judge Burton convened an impromptu court. A distinguished man with silver gray hair and stern but kind eyes, he greeted Margaret and Logan with palpable concern. Margaret felt a surge of emotion, recalling how Andrew had once believed in a fair legal system. Perhaps at last that system would avenge him. Over the next hours, Margaret recounted the Serpents Crossing massacre in stark detail, gently sidestepping sections that might traumatize Hannah, who sat beside them. Logan produced the pouch of documents, survey maps showing valuable land, secret contracts authorized by suspicious officials, and most damning letters signed by the governor himself, giving Gideon Blackmore near unlimited license to clear out obstructions, an ugly euphemism for families like Margaret's. Judge Burton handled the papers as if they were dynamite. I've seen hints of this conspiracy, but not in such detail, he said quietly. You've done this territory a great service, at no small risk to yourselves. Then came the toughest part. Hannah, her courage summoning, described how Gideon's men murdered her parents and younger brother. Quiet tears slid down Logan's face as he listened to her halting words. Margaret felt her own heart twist, recalling Daniel's small form nestled in her arms. To lose that child to violence was unthinkable, yet it had become Hannah's reality. By late evening, Judge Burton declared he'd enough testimony. He arranged lodging for them in the fort's guest quarters and assigned a guard, mindful that Gideon could still stage one last strike. Meanwhile, he planned to convene a formal hearing with the territorial authorities. If the governors indicted, Burton added, it'll be because of this evidence. Still, Gideon himself remained at large. Rumors placed him in the Badlands west of the fort. Don't worry, Marshal Cornell assured Logan. We've tripled patrols. The second Gideon dares show his face, we'll seize him. Logan nodded, tension easing. He's cunning, but desperation might drive him into mistakes. The next day, as a crisp sunrise lit the fort's dusty courtyard, a hush fell. Margaret stepped outside baby Daniel in a sling. Soldiers whispered of sightings beyond the western ridges. Gunshots had rung out in the night. She found Logan near the stable, finishing a quiet talk with Cornell. The marshal's expression was grim. They found bodies of two men rumored to be Gideon's subordinates. Gideon himself might be eliminating any who could testify against him. Logan growled, "He's cornered. A dangerous animal now." That afternoon, the fort's gates swung wide for a group of riders escorting prisoners. Margaret's pulse spiked at the sight of the forefront. A massive figure slumped in the saddle, bound hand and foot, face twisted in rage. Gideon Blackmore, unmistakable even from a distance. He spat insults at the marshals. The entire fort courtyard gathered to watch. Hannah squeezed Margaret's hand until her knuckles whitened. Judge Burton emerged, flanked by deputies. "Gideon Blackmore," he intoned, "you stand accused of orchestrating multiple massacres, kidnapping and high treason against territorial law. Surrender now to due process." Gideon sneered, "You have no idea the powers that shielded me. They'll see you burn." But the official documents in the judge's possession rendered those words hollow as the outlaws were marched to the holding cells. Hannah let out a sharp sob. Logan gathered her close, whispering reassurance. This moment was the culmination of her nightmares. The man responsible now in chains. In the days that followed, the conspiracy unraveled swiftly. Corrupt officials fled or were arrested. The governor, indicted and disgraced, faced public outrage. Survivors from other attacks came forward, adding to the avalanche of charges. Margaret, Logan, Hannah, and baby Daniel watched the legal machinery grind forward, ensuring no avenue for Gideon's escape. One sunset a week later, after Gideon's final hearing, Margaret joined Logan and Hannah outside the fort's walls. The westering sun lit the horizon in hues of gold and pink. Daniel dozed in Margaret's arms. Hannah gazed at the scattering birds overhead. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. Margaret looked at Logan. Their eyes met, recalling every step that led them here, pain, terror, a bond forged in adversity. "We keep going," she murmured, brushing a hand over Daniel's sleeping form. "We rebuild what was lost, or we build something entirely new together," Logan nodded, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm done hunting ghosts. It's time to live for the present and the future." Hannah smiled shyly, as if finally believing in tomorrow. They mounted horses ready to depart Fort Carter for a small tract of land offered by grateful authorities to victims turned heroes. A place to cultivate, to let children grow without gunfire haunting their dreams. As they rode out the gate, guards saluted them, symbolic of the respect they'd earned. For Margaret Tilden, the journey from that blood-soaked grove to a hopeful horizon defied any fate she'd once imagined. She pressed the ticking pocket watch. Andrew's watch closed, feeling it measure seconds, not in sorrow but in promise. She thought of the bear cave where fear almost overwhelmed her, and the line shack where trust found root. Now a final turn of the page, a future in which the child in her arms would thrive under open skies, free from Gideon Blackmore's shadow. The weight of tragedy didn't vanish, but it transformed, fueling resilience. As they crested a rise, Margaret glanced back at the fort receding behind them, an emblem of their hard-won justice. Then she faced forward, shoulders squaring. The stone-fanged mountains loomed in the distance, once menacing now, a reminder that life like those peaks could be scaled with determination and courage. Her son fussed softly and she soothed him, smiling at Logan's reassuring glance. The road ahead was their own to define, forging a family, not by blood alone but by survival, hope, and the decision to move forward together. Looking back on Margaret and Logan's harrowing trials, it's clear that hope can surface even when darkness seems absolute. Their remarkable bond, born in a time of grief, enabled them to challenge overwhelming odds, protect a new life, and forge a path toward genuine justice. Each challenge became an opportunity to rediscover resilience and love. Personally, I see their story as a testament to how compassion and bravery can blossom from tragedy. When we reach out to help one another, whether it's sharing a warm fire or risking everything to shield a newborn, we find our own strength in the process. What do you think of Margaret and Logan's transformation? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And remember to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting narratives that remind us every winding trail can lead to a brighter tomorrow.